Hey, what's up YouTube? Here's a quick video to show you how I built this effect. It's a way of drawing some sort of localized damage map quite precisely on an animated skeletal mesh. I'm not sure how well that technique would scale for many characters, so I'd say it's quite experimental, but I thought it was interesting enough to show you guys how it's done. So first things first, I exported those Paragon characters, so we have Crunch here and Muriel here, to FBX. Let's focus on Crunch. Apparently that mesh had 2 UV maps to begin with, so I made a third to be able to unwrap everything and make sure there's no overlap. This character is made of multiple materials and they all have their own UVs, but the damage texture we'll create in Unreal Engine, for both simplicity and performance, is going to be a single texture, so I needed a way for all those materials to sample that single texture with unique UVs. So once I made that third UV map, I exported that mesh, and I also exported a second version with just a single material and the 2 original UV maps removed. Ideally you'd want to use an LOD for that second mesh, or at least try to reduce the triangle count, because it doesn't need to be that detailed. It's going to be rendered for the damage map and not even actually be visible. Just make sure the damage UV map between that mesh and the original mesh is as similar as possible. If you do modify that second mesh here, it will make sense in a minute. Anyway, back in the engine, I have a pawn that has some basic movement controls, nothing fancy. On left click, I start ticking, and on tick I line trace forward in the camera direction from the middle of the screen, and then send a message to the actor it, if any, via a blueprint interface. Here there's some stuff to make it look fancy, like control for the laser beam, sparks and point light. It's not important. That draw damage interface function called here is implemented in my character blueprint to cascade the message to the damage painter, which is spawned on begin play. It's the star of the show, more on that in a second. So that Crunch blueprint is here to mimic your basic character blueprint, right? It has a skeletal mesh, Crunch, and its Anim blueprint is quite straightforward. It plays an LL animation and it has a slot to play emote animations using a montage that is chosen randomly every now and then. Nothing fancy here, like I said, the magic happens in the damage painter blueprint, so let's check it out. It has a static mesh and a skeletal mesh, both are set to be visible to scene captures only. The static mesh is just a plane that acts as a background for the scene capture component. That scene capture component renders this actor only and captures the scene color using the additive mode. So when that damage painter actor is spawned, all these variables can be set, and then that event is called to set the skeletal mesh, so our Anim class can copy its pose. If we check the construction script, we can see that we set our skeletal mesh's animation instance here. The animation instance as specified here for Crunch is configured to copy the pose of the given skeletal mesh via blueprint interface, so that's what we do here. Spawn the damage actor, notify it of the skeletal mesh to copy, and that damage actor will cascade that message to its skeletal mesh component animation blueprint. We also set a single material for a skeletal mesh, and it's very simple but very cool. I can basically give it a world space location and draw a spherical gradient of a given radius. That's what's happening in that draw damage function the character calls when this is called upon our LineTrace hit. So all this material does is to draw a white spherical gradient at a specific location. But then with that bit of math I can unwrap the mesh this material is applied to based on a specific UV map, and we'll use that unique UV map we made earlier in Blender. That's a neat trick that I first learned here, so big shout out to Tommy for making this great article. So the idea here is to draw the damage on the skeletal mesh, unwrap it and lay it flat, and then capture it. That way we essentially render the damage texture itself by rendering an unwrapped version of our skeletal mesh. And because the scene capture mode is additive, it will keep adding to our render target, so we can kinda paint the whole mesh and keep adding damage. See, it glows and glows even more. So obviously this is just an example, you could paint blood or wounds or all sorts of other effects. That material is why I chose to have a duplicated skeletal mesh, and also why I consider this technique not that great performance-wise, we have that second skeletal mesh that acts as an invisible ghost of our character, so yeah, that's not ideal. What led me to do this? Well, our original crunch model here has multiple materials, so I'd need to loop through them all, store them, then apply my paint material for the capture when we paint damage, right? And then reapply all original materials. So maybe it'd be more performant, I don't know, but that sounded like a complicated thing to do, so I went the duplicated mesh way for now. There's probably smarter ways to do all this. Feel free to play with the idea and come up with your own version. This was a quick experiment on my side, so I didn't want to push it too far. Oh, and tiny detail, but one that was annoying to figure out, so maybe that will save you a headache. The skeletal mesh on the damage painter blueprint is hidden. It's visible to scene captures only, like I said. And for some reason, the Anim blueprint decides to not update its bones, so our skeletal mesh doesn't copy the pose of the given skeletal mesh of our crunch actor. To fix this, we just need to tweak this little setting here. Anyway, we can also fade out the damage over time if we choose to, by copying that render target to a buffer render target, decreasing its value based on a specific rate, and copying the buffer back to the initial render target. Then I just sampled that damage texture in all materials used on that crunch model, using that third UV map we created, and basically that's it. To spice things up a little bit though, I also made this Niagara particle system that spawns particles when crunch is damaged where it's damaged. I sample the skeletal mesh that particle system is attached to, make sure the sampling type is surface so it can output a UV value per particle, and make sure we do use the correct UV index for the damage map. And then I made a custom module that will kill all spawned particles in case there's not enough damage on the texture at their burst location on the mesh. I'm sure there's a way you could push this way further, but for a quick demo I felt like this was enough. Voila, I hope you learned something. Files are available as a tier 2 reward on my Patreon. I'm working hard on making those projects in one hand and working on my game on the other hand, so I definitely appreciate your support. Thanks so much. Speaking of my game, here's a tiny sneak peek I showed on my Twitter and my Discord a couple days ago. It's quite a heavy work in progress, but hopefully I can polish this and release a simple demo for you guys in a couple of months. Feel free to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you like the content. That's it for today. Have a good day. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself. Bye bye!